Views, which probably taken place early on of the suspects. But it's a major thing is getting good medical workups on all the children to document any type of abuse or neglect that may have taken place and how it took place.
And I think that's a good point. They were all taken to the hospital on June 30th when they were found, and they were all evaluated. Some were in the hospital, it seemed like for 2 or 3 days, possibly maybe even longer. One had to be intubated. We don't know the age of that child, but all of the children were taken to the hospital or hospitals to be checked out. Some of them were
Different story. This wasn't a sudden break from reality. This was a system of prolonged, calculated isolation that operated in plain sight for nearly 2 decades. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Project Cold Case, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence.
from the jail's Sally Port shows a sheriff's van pulling into the jail. The Ciders aren't the only ones in the van, so it takes some time for the corrections officers to get them out of the vehicle. The first Ciders family members that jail staff removed from the van is the oldest, 73-year-old Gary Ciders Sr. It appears the officers...
Video from the jail Sally Port shows a sheriff's van pulling into the jail. The CERS aren't the only ones in the van, so it takes some time for the corrections officers to get them out of the vehicle. The first CERS family members that jail staff removed from the van is the oldest 73-year-old Gary Ciders Sr. It appears the officers are having some trouble getting him out of that van. The jail intake footage begins with a logistical problem. 4 adults, 16 children, and a house that would later be described by the Venton County Sheriff as containing conditions worse than what most of...
Condition wasn't known to jail staff. That was only discovered after he fell on the way to jail and was taken to the hospital for that injury. At this point, Gary Sr. is safely in the wheelchair, and the officers prepare to move him from the Sally Port to the jail. He appears to have a white bandage on his shoulder. Why? We don't know. At the same time, other officers are trying to get Gary Jr. out of the back of the van. Gary Jr. is in handcuffs, so he is pulled from the back of the van so he can be led into the jail hallway with his father. Interestingly enough, Gary Ciders Sr. is shackled at the ankles, and he is also handcuffed at the front. Those cuffs are attached to a belly chain to keep him secure. A male corrections officer wheels Gary Sr. into the hallway. This is the area where an initial search of inmates is conducted. Every jail has an area similar to this one. You'll notice that Gary Sr. is not shackled at the ankles like his son. Gary Sr. is wearing pajama bottoms, and he seems a little out of it. Gary Jr. trails behind his father, again shackled at the ankles and handcuffed, and those cuffs are held in place by that belly chain. The officers tell...
Well, we will keep an eye on it and see where it goes. Rob Junk, thank you so much for joining me. We appreciate it. Oh, you're entirely welcome. Thank you, and Janete. Now, we ask you to look at the evidence. The Ohio Attorney General's office has stated that this is an ongoing investigation and additional charges are expected. The public record contains a press release from the Ohio Attorney General dated July 1st, 2026, titled Update on Venton County Abuse Case. Read the official statement. Compare the official language, prolonged and extreme interfamilial neglect and abuse, with the images you see in the jail video. Ask yourself, how many systems, medical, educational, social services, failed these 16 children before the state arrived with a search warrant? This isn't just a story about one family in southern Ohio. It's a story about accountability and how we choose to use the documents that are available to us. The answer isn't in a news headline, it's in the evidence, if you choose to follow it. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Project Cold Case, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. We follow the evidence. The CZ.A.
Actually, one of the officers looks inside Gary Jr.'s mouth to make sure that he doesn't have anything in there. And then Gary Jr. is taken to another area of the jail for further processing. Gary Sr. sits in the wheelchair as this is going on, and we don't know what he's thinking or feeling, but eventually he seems to put his head in his hands. He continues to sit in that wheelchair as the jail staff continues their work. Several minutes pass.
She's practically cowering. She looks scared. The corrections officer asks Christina a number of questions which she appears to answer. Elizabeth simply stands by and watches as this entire process unfolds. As the booking process unfolds, Christina Ciders, 67, the matriarch of the family, enters the jail hallway. She is handcuffed and connected to a belly chain. She stands up straight and answers questions. Then comes Elizabeth Ciders, 33, the wife of Gary Jr. She is not handcuffed. She is carrying papers. The reference transcript describes her body language as practically cowering. She looks scared. Her hair is wet, suggesting a recent shower. A mark on her left arm resembles a bruise. This is the same Elizabeth Ciders who, according to...
But she is not shackled at the ankles. Christina stands up straight, but Elizabeth's body language appears to be much different. She's practically cowering. She looks scared. The corrections officer asks Christina a number of questions, which she appears to answer. Elizabeth simply stands by and watches as this entire process unfolds. Then it's Elizabeth's turn to be searched. After answering a few questions, she's patted down, the whole 9 yards. This process takes place before each of the Ciders family members are moved to another area where each is given an orange jail jumpsuit to wear. It's standard issue. All of the Ciders were moved into another area for intake, and they're asked a number of questions by a jail staff member. You can see Elizabeth sitting here. Her hair is wet, so it appears she had a shower. Her hair looks different from her mugshot. Elizabeth looks around at times. She doesn't have a criminal record, so this is the first time.
We don't know how many devices were seized. We do know that the children, though, appeared to be on social media. They had social media accounts. They had phones. That's our understanding. So they're going to be downloading a number of devices they seized from that house. How telling could that be in assisting with this investigation? And that can also take a lot of time. The Attorney General's office has stated that electronic devices seized from the home will be analyzed by the crime lab. This is a key comment, as the reference transcript points out. The children, despite being isolated from the outside world, allegedly had phones and social media accounts. However, those accounts contain no photos of the children themselves, only reposted
Of one or the other. Jail staff documented several tattoos on Gary Jr. They have names and hearts and crosses. One is a cross with a sword. One is an outlaw tattoo with a peace sign. In the intake video, you can see Gary Jr. show the officer asking him the questions his arms. He later shows his legs, likely showing the many tattoos. At one point, Gary Jr. looks back and he waves at someone. We don't know who he's waving at, but he appears to talk too. But there are so many questions that remain in this case. Many, many questions. What is going on with this investigation? Why did the deputies go to the house in the first place with a search warrant? Gary Jr. also faces 4 public indecency charges related to alleged incidents at his home during the last week of May, but that likely wouldn't be enough to get a search warrant. The deputies were looking for evidence of a crime at the home. That's what a search warrant is for. And the Attorney General has said.
And anytime you have an alleged abuse and neglect case, it's always sad. Yeah, I'm wondering if these phones were possibly given to the kids to entertain them, to keep them from just, wanting to go outside. Instead, you give your kid a screen. Most parents want to keep their kids off a screen. But the digital clues only deepen the mystery. How could a family with limited means afford multiple phones? The narrative of neglect collides with the reality of technology. A former prosecutor on the reference transcript suggests that giving the children phones was a
Rob, thanks so much for coming on to talk with me about the Ciders case.
Oh, you're entirely welcome.
Talk to me right now, from your perspective as a former prosecutor. What do you think is going on in this investigation right now? You're in the county right next door, in Pike County, next to Venton. So what do you think is happening as far as getting information together for the grand jury and the investigation?
I think probably the most important thing that they would be working on now is medical exams on the children.
And imagine what they're going to do is send all these devices to BCI's cybercrimes unit. They'll go through, download everything, review it. And again, that's something I've been through before in other cases. I'm pretty familiar with the process. It does take a long time to do some of that stuff. Meanwhile, the ticking clock of justice continues. All 4 defendants are being held on $300,000 bond. Under Ohio law, the state has 90 days to bring them to trial due to the speedy trial rule where every day in jail counts as 3.
I want to see how these children have been affected mentally and physically over the past few years and the time period they're looking at.
We know that the 6 older children, there were complaints filed in Gallia County against Gary Jr. and Elizabeth because the 6 older kids had not been to school in 2021 at all. In October of 2021, they had not been to school. So it's been, those kids were at some point enrolled in school. Now we're years past that. The kids, I'm sure they've said, have not been in school. So what kind of challenge does that pose in evaluating these children? Because they could be.
One thing I'm really curious about, it's come out, that Elizabeth and Gary Jr., obviously they were married when she was 15. They went over to West Virginia to do that. Then, there's been some reporting about other Ciders, family members, cousins, things of that nature who were married at 15, 14, things like that. In Pike County, just next door, former prosecutor and current judge Rob Junk called those teenage marriages a giant red flag, saying that if he got wind of it, his first call would be to Children's Services and the sheriff. In Ohio, any adult having...
They're not going to be able to get it done by the time like 90 days for speedy trial runs. To give an example, when you were involved in covering the Road and Bandy Gilly homicides, that's the perfect example. They all had executed time waivers. And there are also some events that toll the time, stop the clock too, such as certain motions and things like that.
Well, we will keep an eye on it and see where it goes. Rob Junk, thank you so much for joining me. We appreciate it.
Oh, you're entirely welcome. Thank you, Anjanette.
So as I mentioned, this investigation is ongoing. It's far from over. A gag order has been granted in Gary Jr.'s case, but it's being challenged at the Ohio Supreme Court. Christina's attorney has requested a non-dissemination order, but the judge has not ruled on that yet, and the prosecution hasn't responded to that request. So there's a lot to unpack here, a lot to dig into, so stay tuned. We'll be on top of it. And that's it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.